Hello and welcome to Y'all Monitor Brief. It's May 3rd. I'm Kristen Tallman. You may have noticed this episode is just a little bit later than the normal ones, which come out earlier in the morning. We're trying a little bit of a new method where some episodes will release earlier in the morning and others later in the afternoon, just to see what works best for listeners. So today's main segment is a conversation with Jared Zuba, Al Monitor's Pentagon correspondent, on the ceasefire deal that hangs by a thread as Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the U.S.'s demands, wants, and wishes are all being held up by one thing or another. But first, let's get you caught up on the headlines. Floods caused by torrential rainstorms killed 4 hikers in the Sulaymaniyah region of northern Iraq on Friday, local officials said. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Friday said Turkey's move to halt trade with Israel was designed to force the country to a ceasefire in Gaza. The decision, announced on Thursday, is the latest indication of deteriorating relations between the two countries. Yemen's Houthi rebels on Friday threatened to extend their attacks on Israel-bound shipping to the Mediterranean after months of strikes on vessels in the Red Sea. International Criminal Court prosecutors warned on Friday against individuals who threaten to retaliate against the tribunal or its staff, saying such actions may constitute an offensive against its administration of justice. Tunisian journalists and opposition figures have voiced alarm over a surge of prosecutions since President Kais Saied issued a decree outlawing what authorities deem to be false news. A top Hamas official accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Friday of trying to derail a proposed Gaza truce and hostage release deal with his threats to keep fighting the Palestinian militant group. Hundreds of supporters of Israel and Gaza faced off at a Sydney university Friday, bringing echoes of U.S. college protests and Middle East turmoil to a campus and continent on the other side of the world. And in case you missed it, President Joe Biden broke his silence Thursday on the student protests against Israel's war with Hamas, but the U.S. president faces a difficult balancing act to avoid hurting his re-election chances against Donald Trump. And looking towards the weekend, CIA Chief Burns is now in Cairo, with Hamas expected to arrive tomorrow. Israeli leaders will wait for what Sinwar decides on the hostage and ceasefire deal currently on the table. Now, on to the main segment. Hey, Jared, welcome to the Y'all Monitor Brief.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you for having me.
So, Jared, there's been a lot of focus this week on Biden's grand bargain between Saudi and Israel and sort of the steps towards an 11th hour ceasefire deal. Each side has their different wants and demands and wishes to make this deal come together. Can you walk us through what each side is looking for and how some of it has kind of come to hang in the balance over the past couple days?
So Saudi Arabia is seeking defense guarantees from the United States. They have significant concerns that Iran poses threats to their security and potentially to their economy for Saudi Arabia's allowance for American forces to use their territory bases on Saudi territory. So Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been seeking guarantees from the United States that the U.S. would come to Saudi Arabia's defense if it comes under attack. Now, in order to provide that, the Biden administration would have to get approval from the Senate if that were to come in the form of a formal treaty. Lawmakers in Congress have expressed willingness to go along with this if Saudi Arabia is willing to normalize ties with Israel. But in order to do that, so the Saudi government has made clear in recent months that they want to see commitments from Israeli leaders to take steps towards what they are calling an irreversible pathway towards Palestinian statehood on 1967 borders. Now, what's missing from this so-called grand bargain or tripartite pact is that Israeli leaders are in the midst of a war in Gaza. And my sources are telling me that nothing could be further from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's mind than offering grand concessions to the Palestinians amid the October 7th war. So the Saudi Arabia and the United States have come very close to putting all the pieces in place for a bilateral strategic defense agreement, which ostensibly would include U.S. support for full-cycle nuclear enrichment on Saudi territory, which is a significant concession from the United States given non-proliferation concerns. However, the key cornerstone of this deal is missing, which is Israeli commitment to Palestinian statehood. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern here.
And at the beginning of the week, it really felt like there might be steps towards minting a ceasefire deal and, getting closer to all these pieces coming together. But now there's been reporting that some of that might be really not as close as it's been projected. And a lot of that could be hanging by a thread. Now that we're at the end of the week, what has some of your reporting shown on where we stand and what all the actors are asking for, and if it's being met?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the week, I think it was on Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and I believe the Saudi foreign minister as well made very similar statements at the World Economic Forum in Riyadh, saying that they're very close to a bilateral defense deal. And Blinken went a little further than that, seeming to suggest that once the deal is in place bilaterally, Israeli leaders will have to, and I'm paraphrasing here, will have to make some decisions of their own. He seemed to be hinting at a sort of fait accompli in which the Israelis would essentially be faced with a choice. Prime Minister Netanyahu's government would have to decide whether he could secure a legacy of gaining Israeli normalization with Saudi Arabia, or he could launch his promised attack on Rafah, triggering a potential humanitarian catastrophe, squandering U.S. goodwill on this issue. So that's the dilemma that's been put forward. But again, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu has been clear that the Israeli military will push into Rafah to pursue the remaining Hamas battalions with or without a ceasefire deal with Hamas. There is concern in Washington that that sort of threat undermines rather than increases the pressure on the hostage negotiations.
Okay. So basically statements that were said on Monday in Riyadh by Blinken were interpreted in a way that kind of led to a lot of this reporting this week, but it seems like the Netanyahu government is still intent on going forward with their operation despite potential blowback in Washington. Jared, thank you so much. Is there anything else that we should know or be up to date with from the security angle?
Yes, I think it is important to note that if the Israeli government goes ahead with an operation at Rafah, it doesn't mean that there can't eventually be a future trilateral or grand bargain agreement with Saudi normalization with Israel. There's not necessarily been indication that the whole deal will be thrown out if Israel goes into Rafah with a sort of tailored operational approach, neighborhood by neighborhood, after evacuating civilians and providing for their humanitarian needs. So it's not as if the deal is dead or is at risk of collapsing, but it's worth noting that there's no signs that it's going to be coming through anytime soon. As you saw, I think yesterday, State Department spokesman Matt Miller said that all the components of the deal will go through together. They are interdependent. There is no sign of a sort of separate U.S. and Saudi bilateral deal, and then later down the line, Israel joins and there's normalization with Saudi Arabia. It's possible. It could be potentially managed, but there's no sign that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is seeking anything less than a full U.S. defense guarantees, which, of course, as noted, has to go through the Senate, which then depends on Israel normalization with Saudi. So if anything, the grand bargain is at this moment in limbo, and we're facing a bit of a dangerous moment with the Israeli promise to go into Rafah, but we'll have to see how things play out. Yeah.
Jared, thank you so much.
That's it for today, May 3rd. You can read all these stories and more impacting the region at allmonitor.com.